How God guards the identity He placed in you. There is something sacred God placed inside you long before the world ever tried to define you. An identity formed by His hands, spoken by His voice, and anchored in His truth. Yet, every day, that identity is pressed, questioned and challenged by disappointment, by failure, by comparison, by the opinions of others, and even by your own doubts. What many people don't realize is this: God does not simply give you an identity and then leave it unguarded. He actively protects what He planted in you. You may have felt moments where your confidence was shaken, where circumstances tried to tell you who you were, where mistakes made you question your worth. But even in those moments, God was not absent. He was present, watching over the very core of who you are. The enemy may attack your identity relentlessly, but God defends it relentlessly. He knows that if your identity remains intact, your faith will endure, your purpose will stand, and your future will not be stolen. God understands how fragile identity can feel in a broken world. That is why He guards it daily. Not loudly, not always visibly, but faithfully. He shields it from lies that would shrink you. He corrects you before shame can define you. He protects you in silence when answers delay. He stands as your defender when you are misunderstood. And sometimes He removes things from your life, not to harm you, but to preserve who you are becoming. This message is not about striving to protect yourself. It's about resting in the truth that God is already protecting you. Even when you didn't notice, even when you felt exposed, even when you questioned yourself. If you've ever wondered why certain battles didn't destroy you, why certain seasons didn't change who you were at the core, or why something inside you remained intact despite the pressure, this is why. God is guarding the identity He placed in you, and understanding how He does that will change the way you see yourself, your struggles, and the quiet faithfulness of God working every single day. Number 1. God guards your identity from false labels and lies. One of the most consistent ways God protects the identity He placed in you is by guarding it against false labels and lies. From the moment you begin walking through life, voices rise up to define you. Some loud, some subtle, some even coming from within your own mind. Failure tries to rename you, rejection tries to reduce you, comparison tries to distort you, pain tries to convince you that who you are is equal to what happened to you. But God stands watch over your identity, refusing to let those voices have the final word. God knows that identity is the battlefield before behavior ever becomes one. If the enemy can convince you that you are broken, unworthy, forgotten, or disqualified, then your confidence, faith, and obedience will slowly erode. That is why God continually speaks truth over you even when you are not aware of it. He reminds you who you are through His word, through conviction, through quiet reassurance, and sometimes through the simple fact that you are still standing after what should have destroyed you. There are moments when lies feel louder than truth, when circumstances seem to confirm every negative label you feared. But God's protection doesn't mean lies won't be spoken. It means they won't take root unless you allow them to. God interrupts false narratives by anchoring your identity in something unchanging: His character. You are not defined by your worst moment, your slow progress, or your unanswered prayers. You are defined by the God who called you His own. Often, God protects your identity by reminding you of truth at just the right moment. A verse resurfaces, a thought is interrupted, a quiet conviction rises that says, this is not who you are. That interruption is not accidental. It is God guarding what belongs to Him. He refuses to let temporary seasons permanently rename you. If you have ever felt pressure to become smaller, quieter, harder, or less hopeful because of what life has thrown at you, recognize this: God has been standing between you and the lie. Every time you chose to keep believing, to keep hoping, to keep showing up as yourself, it was evidence that God was protecting your identity. He is faithful to guard what He created, And no lie spoken by others or whispered by your own fear has more authority than his truth over your life. Number 2. God protects your identity through conviction, not condemnation. Another powerful way God guards your identity is through conviction rather than condemnation. Many people confuse these two, but they have opposite purposes. Condemnation attacks who you are. Conviction protects who you are becoming. God never corrects you to shame you. He corrects you to preserve you. This distinction is one of the clearest signs that God is actively guarding your identity. When you drift, make mistakes, or compromise, condemnation says, this is who you are. Conviction says, this is not who you are. Condemnation pushes you away from God in shame. Conviction draws you back to God in humility. God uses conviction to gently realign you before your actions begin to rewrite your sense of self. God understands how easily identity can become entangled with failure. That is why he does not allow guilt to linger unchecked. He brings correction early, quietly, and with purpose. He speaks to your heart not to accuse you, but to remind you of your true identity. Conviction says, come back. Condemnation says, you don't belong. God never speaks the language of exile to his children. Sometimes, conviction feels uncomfortable because it requires honesty. It exposes patterns, attitudes, or choices that don't align with who God created you to be. But that discomfort is protection. God would rather interrupt you now than allow you to walk far enough to forget who you are. His correction is evidence of care, not rejection. Notice how conviction always leaves room for hope. Even when God corrects firmly, there is an invitation attached to repent, to realign, to return. Condemnation leaves no door open. Conviction always does. That open door is God guarding your identity from being rewritten by failure. If you have ever felt corrected but not crushed, challenged but not rejected, exposed but still loved, that was God protecting the core of who you are. He was keeping your mistakes from becoming your name. He was preserving your identity, even while shaping your character. God protects your identity by refusing to let shame define you. He disciplines those he loves because he knows what is at stake. Your identity matters too much to him to leave it vulnerable to condemnation. And every time conviction leads you back to truth instead of into hiding, it is proof that God is actively guarding what he placed inside you. Number 3, God shields your identity during seasons of waiting and silence. One of the most overlooked ways God protects your identity is through seasons of waiting and silence. When answers delay and clarity feels distant, it's easy to believe something is wrong with you, that you are forgotten, overlooked, or no longer chosen. But in truth, waiting is often God's shield. Silence is often his covering. God knows that identity can be damaged when outcomes come before maturity, so he protects who you are by slowing what you receive. Waiting exposes where you've been tempted to attach your identity to progress, visibility, or success. When nothing moves, God gently separates who you are from what you produce. He teaches your soul that you are still loved, still chosen, still held, even when nothing is changing on the outside. This is not punishment. This is preservation. God is ensuring that your identity remains rooted in him rather than in results. In silence, God protects you from false conclusions. If he spoke too quickly, you might misunderstand him. If he acted too soon, you might rely on the outcome instead of on him. Silence forces intimacy. It teaches you to listen beyond words and trust beyond reassurance. And in that place, your identity deepens. You learn that you are God's even when you feel uncertain. Waiting also protects you from comparison. When your timeline doesn't match others, God is preventing you from building your identity on someone else's path. He is shaping something specific in you, something that requires patience, endurance, and faith. Identity formed in waiting is resilient. It cannot be shaken easily because it was forged when there was nothing to lean on but God. If you are in a season where prayers feel unanswered and progress feels slow, don't assume your identity is weakening. Often, it is being fortified. God is shielding you from premature outcomes that could distort who you are. He is teaching you that you are not defined by movement, momentum, or milestones. When waiting is over and silence lifts, you will notice something has changed. Not just your circumstances, but your inner stability. You will receive what God gives without losing yourself in it. That is no accident. God protected your identity while you waited, and the strength you gained in silence will remain long after the season passes. Number 4. God defends your identity when you are misunderstood or opposed. Another powerful way God guards your identity is by defending it when you are misunderstood, misjudged, or opposed. There are seasons when your intentions are questioned, your heart is misread, and your obedience is misunderstood. In those moments, the temptation is to explain yourself, defend your reputation, or fight for your name. But often God asks you to remain still, not because he agrees with the accusation, but because he is protecting something deeper than public opinion. God knows that identity can become fragile when it is tied to how others perceive you. If you constantly need to correct narratives, prove motives, or justify obedience, your identity slowly shifts from being God-centered to people-centered. So God steps in as your defender. He allows misunderstanding not to harm you, but to free you from needing approval to feel secure. When God defends your identity, he does it quietly. He doesn't always clear your name immediately. Sometimes he lets time reveal truth. Sometimes he allows fruit to speak louder than explanation. Sometimes he simply strengthens your heart so that misinterpretation doesn't redefine you. His defense is not always visible, but it is always effective. Opposition also clarifies identity. It reveals whether you are rooted in God's calling or in people's acceptance. When God allows resistance, he is often separating you from false validation. He is teaching you to stand on truth even when affirmation is absent. That kind of identity cannot be shaken by criticism or praise. Notice that God often defends identity by reminding you who you are in private rather than proving it in public. He reassures you in prayer. He steadies you in his presence. He anchors you in his promises, and that inner confirmation becomes stronger than external misunderstanding. If you have ever been misunderstood yet remained intact, criticized yet not destroyed, opposed yet still obedient, that was not resilience alone. It was God's protection. He was guarding your identity from being reshaped by opinions that were never meant to define you. God fights battles over your name, so you can remain focused on your calling. And when he is your defender, your identity does not depend on being understood. It depends on being faithful. Number 5, God protects your identity by separating you from what would dilute it. One of the most painful yet protective ways God guards your identity is through separation. There are moments when relationships fade, doors close, routines break, or environments shift, and it feels like loss. But often what feels like loss is actually preservation. God separates you not because he wants to isolate you, but because he wants to protect who you are becoming. Identity is shaped by proximity. What you stay connected to will eventually shape how you see yourself. God knows this. He sees how certain voices slowly distort your confidence, how certain environments dull your sensitivity, how certain habits quietly rewrite your values. So he intervenes, sometimes gently, sometimes abruptly. He removes access to what would slowly dilute the identity he placed in you. This separation is rarely explained in advance. If God told you everything he was protecting you from, you might resist the process. So instead, he asks you to trust him. He allows distance to form, so your identity can breathe, heal, and realign. What once felt familiar may no longer feel right. What once felt safe may now feel restrictive. This is not rejection, it is refinement. God also separates you from versions of yourself that no longer align with His purpose. Old coping mechanisms, old mindsets, old identities formed in survival seasons begin to fall away. This can feel disorienting. You may wonder who you are without them. But God is not erasing you. He is restoring you. He is removing what no longer reflects your true identity. Separation protects you from compromise. It keeps you from shrinking to fit spaces God has already outgrown for you. It prevents your identity from being shaped by convenience instead of calling. And while the loneliness of separation can be heavy, it is temporary. God never removes without the intention to replace with healthier connections, clearer purpose, and deeper intimacy with Him. If you've experienced unexpected distance, sudden endings, or quiet withdrawals that felt confusing, don't assume something went wrong. Often, God was standing guard. He was protecting your identity from being diluted, distracted, or distorted. And the clarity you gain in separation will eventually reveal just how much He was preserving all along. Number 6. God reinforces your identity through His daily presence. Beyond dramatic moments and major seasons, one of the most consistent ways God protects your identity is through His daily presence. Not through grand gestures, but through quiet faithfulness. God reinforces who you are by staying near, by walking with you in ordinary moments, steadying your heart and reminding you of truth again and again. Identity is strengthened through relationship. The more time you spend in God's presence, the more secure you become in who you are. His nearness stabilizes you when emotions fluctuate. His voice centers you when doubt creeps in. His peace anchors you when life feels uncertain. God doesn't just protect your identity in crisis, He protects it in consistency. Daily presence recalibrates you. When the world pulls at your sense of worth, God's presence resets it. When pressure tempts you to perform, His presence reminds you that you are already loved. When comparison tries to creep in, His presence reaffirms your uniqueness. God guards your identity by continually bringing you back to Him. This presence is not always emotional or dramatic. Sometimes it is simply the awareness that God is with you, a quiet reassurance, a steady peace, a gentle nudge. These small moments accumulate. Over time, they form a deep-rooted identity that is not easily shaken by circumstance. God's presence also protects you from forgetting who you are. In a fast-paced world, it's easy to drift. Daily intimacy keeps your heart aligned. It reminds you of what matters. It protects you from slowly adopting identities shaped by pressure instead of purpose. If you've felt God's nearness in ordinary days, if you've sensed peace without explanation, conviction without shame, comfort without words, recognize that this is not incidental. God is reinforcing your identity moment by moment. He is guarding the core of who you are by staying close. And when identity is rooted in God's presence rather than performance, it becomes unshakable, because no circumstance can remove what is continually sustained by Him. Number 7. God secures your identity for eternity, not just this season. The final and most powerful way God protects your identity is by anchoring it beyond time, circumstance, and seasons. God does not guard your identity only for the moment you're in. He secures it for eternity. While the world constantly reshapes identity based on success, failure, age, status, relevance, God roots who you are in something unchanging, His eternal purpose and promise. Your identity in God is not seasonal. It is not adjusted based on how well you're doing or how much you've accomplished. It is not revoked when you stumble or struggle. God protects your identity by placing it somewhere nothing on earth can touch. When your identity is secured in Him, no temporary season has the authority to redefine you. This eternal security is what allows believers to endure loss without losing themselves, to walk through failure without being erased by it, and to experience change without becoming unstable. God knows that life will shift, roles will change, seasons will end, people will come and go, and if your identity were tied to any of those things, it would fracture repeatedly, so he anchors it in eternity. God's eternal protection of your identity also means that your worth is not up for debate. You are not valuable because of what you do, but because of who you belong to. You are not significant because of what you achieve, but because God has claimed you as his own. This truth guards you against despair when life strips things away, and against pride when life adds things on. Living from an eternally secured identity changes how you face the future. You stop fearing loss as much. You stop chasing validation so desperately. You stop defining yourself by outcomes that were never meant to carry that weight. You begin to live with quiet confidence, knowing that even if everything changes, who you are in God remains untouched. God's eternal protection also invites responsibility. When you know your identity is secure, you are free to live courageously. You can obey without fear. You can love without needing return. You can stand without constant affirmation. Eternity-focused identity produces stability in a temporary world. If you've sensed a growing awareness that this life is not all there is, that your worth reaches beyond the present moment, and that God's claim on you feels deeper than circumstance, this is not imagination. It is revelation. God is reminding you that the identity he placed in you is guarded not just for today, but forever, and nothing, no loss, no failure, no season, can undo what he has secured. Conclusion: living from the identity God protects. When you understand that God actively protects your identity, something shifts inside you. You stop striving to defend yourself. You stop fearing every mistake. You stop living as though one season could undo who you are. You begin to rest, not in your strength, but in God's faithfulness. Every way God guards your identity reveals his care. He shields you from lies. He corrects you without shaming you. He preserves you in silence. He defends you when misunderstood. He separates you from what would dilute you. He reinforces you through his presence. And he secures you for eternity. None of this is accidental. It is the daily work of a God who knows how precious your identity truly is. You were never meant to carry the weight of self-definition alone. God never intended for your worth to depend on how well you perform or how others perceive you. He guards who you are, because he knows how easily identity can be wounded, and how powerful it becomes when it is protected. If this message stirred something in you, take time to reflect on how God has been guarding you all along. Notice the battles that didn't destroy you, the seasons that didn't change you at the core, the truths that kept resurfacing even when you tried to forget them. That was God. Let this awareness draw you closer to him. Let it quiet your fear. Let it strengthen your confidence. And if this message helped you see yourself more clearly through God's eyes, share it with someone who may be struggling to remember who they are. God is guarding the identity he placed in you, faithfully, intentionally, every single day.